Hello, friends. Um, welcome to. I guess this is called Jack of Spaces now. um, we're doing a big one today. I'm just gonna do a little voice check on my end. Give 1 2 minutes for people to trickle in if they want to. Okay, I'm being told it works really well. That we're sounding crispy. That's very nice. Um, all right, so I'll give it 1 or 2 minutes for people to trickle in. And we'll start it. All right. Thanks for everyone for joining. Um, like I said, big spaces today, but as usual, and as we've learned, let's make it a sort of a meditative process. Again, doesn't have to be deliberate or conscious. Um, you know, just take the information in with an open mind, open spirit, whatever you want to call it. Um, and I'm very glad to see regulars here on here as well. You know, it means we're on the right track. Um, Obviously, a lot going on in the world, but arguably, well, you could argue in any point of history, there's a lot going on in the world. We just happen to live in a point of time where we have basically unlimited access to information, even real time information, right, on things that are occurring. But why I decided to do this space is, well, one, because, and some of you might have felt it, has been sort of a shift in my psyche as well, on a personal level, and on a collective level. We're fast approaching um, that time that I spoke about in our previous sessions, right? And that is a time of great confusion for most people. That is a time where, and you're already seeing the signs of this. Okay, some of the news that have come out recently, right? Some manuscripts and documents, and perhaps questionable videos and photographs of things. So we're entering the age of forgery, right? Where it's very difficult to tell things from things that are fake, things that are truthful, so on and so forth. This is for several reasons, but most importantly, because we're approaching this age, we're also approaching the age of, well, awakening, because evolutionarily, at least this is how it's happened in the past. When the human mind is forced to disassociate from external stimulants, meaning when the world becomes untrustworthy, right? Um, you sort of grow an appetite for just knowing, right? But because it's decreed by the laws of this universe that a certain degree or level of clarity should be provided to one, regardless of their circumstance, right? So we're gonna touch everything today. But most importantly, we're going to touch this topic. We're going to talk about how much fake information is out there, and how untrustworthy most of the players are when it comes to spreading this information. Some people are sort of like victims of their own ego traps, meaning they'll subscribe to an idea they heard somewhere, and then they'll go and they'll rehash that idea a little bit, and then spread it around to whatever, for whatever reasons, right? Now, in the past, I used to be far more violent in how I engaged with these people, right? I called them frauds, so on and so forth. I to this day, I will call them frauds. I don't think they understand the damage that they're doing. But hopefully, at the end of this spaces or conversation or whatever we want to call it, you will have understood the meaning of truthfulness and truth, and the weight of spreading misinformation, right? Primary topics where misinformation is spread: the occult, primarily; astrology, numerology, um, primarily; history and historical context; geopolitics, geopolitical context; um, messianism, eschatonic, you know, sciences, even what I would call, right? Um, all of these areas in which people who are on their path to awakening find great interest. This comes naturally. This is like a this is like a honey trap for these people who will sort of like lead you astray for their own benefit. And most of the people in our space, or not in this particular X space or Twitter space or whatever, but in the occult sort of like themed spaces, are unfortunately doing just that. And most of them are paid very well to do those things, right? As I've talked about it in the past a little bit. Who are the benefactors, right? Who are the investors and the sponsors of this sort of misinfo behavior? Well, we'll talk about them a little bit today as well. So we'll basically touch a lot of topics. Basically, let's start from the very beginning, right? Um, what is the eschaton, right? Or eschaton, some people will call it that. Well, it's a word with a Greek root. Um, and an eschaton signifies the final event in the divine plan of everything, right? The end of the world as we know it, or the end of an era or an age, something along those lines. And this is not a word you see used, very often at all. Most people don't even know the the meaning, or have never even heard about this word. But for the elite circles, this is a very common word to use. And let's say the more you dig into it, the more you start to understand what some of the topics and some of the attitudes in relation to these topics are, when they're being thrown around in these elite circles. For a second, and I love examples, as you guys know, I want you to imagine that there are two eras on Earth, um on our planet. So there is the pre-flood era. Let's call it a geophysical event of catastrophic magnitudes that separates the old era and the new era, just for the sake of simplicity and understanding. So there is the post-flood and the pre-flood, right? And now I want you to imagine that the pre-flood era is um, a sort of conduit or database of information and knowledge about the laws of this world, knowledge about patterns, knowledge about very sophisticated, highly spiritual ideas. And the post flood effect, of course, of that would be most of this knowledge, being lost or unable to be retained, buried, you know, both manually and not, and naturally. And then I want you to understand the context, or the filter from which one would view the post flood world and the people inhabiting the post flood world, um while having retained the wisdom and the knowledge and the technology and the pattern knowing and so on and so forth, and the psychic ability, or so on and so forth, from the pre-flood era, right? I really, really want you to get inside the mindset of such a people, or such a nation, or such a culture, who and how they would almost like grade or value your existence, right? Let's say you are on an amnesiac species. We've talked about this before, and you have no idea where you came from. You have no idea why you're here. You were born, you were raised, and at some point, during your adolescence, hopefully your adolescence, um, you reached a point where you felt yourself making a decision or a choice, or you went through a traumatic event and you found yourself awake and aware and conscious of the life around you. And this was not like any other ordinary consciousness or awareness, right? You were here observing your emotional reaction to the input of the external world. Why did you have to observe? your reactions, because most likely the input from the external world was very painful. It was a very painful experience to awaken into your third mind, right? Your third perspective. One being through your body, the other being through your emotional base, and the third being through, your very, very, very basic understanding of what and who you even were. Now, like we said, we are an amnesiac species who, and each of us, each individual, we are tasked with our own awakening. There are no schools for it, no degrees, no colleges, nothing. No one is there to teach you, no one is there to help you. Your parents can't teach you. Why? Because they didn't know it themselves. Now, what if I told you there is a group of people, or um, yeah, let's call them that. There's a group of people who not only retain the knowledge of, well, who they are and where they came from and why they're here and how things work and yada yada, but they're also meticulously and wonderfully and pleasantly, and gradually and comfortably taught from a very early young age to have grasp on the formulaic truths and knowledge possessed within this world. How would you, if you were one of those people, how would you feel when compared to someone who's, I don't know, just starting to understand how money works? They just hit 21 or 22 and they're just now getting to that point to understand, okay, how does money work? What even is money, right? To them, you're a very basic being, right? To them, you're someone who's barely sentient, right? So why I'm telling you all of this thing before we even talk about all of the factual stuff, I want you to understand the attitude of the black mage. I want you to understand the emotional context and the fundamental perspectives and the attitudes one would have towards the average human before we even talk about what is being done or communicated, right? So my understanding of something like this is that most people who are in the occult circles, they have basically no idea about the darker side of the occult. What they'll do is, like, they'll create this incredibly dumb and basic conspiracy around it, like, I don't know, um, or they'll like spread some misinfo about it. They'll come out and say like, oh, like, Pete, the world is run by evil people, and they have to they actually believe that if they show you all of the wrong things that they're doing, that they will somehow be free of the karma because blah 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 blah. Degeneracy, right? um you think the black mage or dark magic is as basic as, um you think God or the universe or the creator of this universe, the absolute mind, the source of highest knowing, does not understand context in regards to sin and karmic punishment? This is a ridiculous notion. And why people do this is because it's their best explanation of it within their small frame of mind. It's the best sort of, like, logic they could come up with, and then, the party on the other side, whoever they are, right? Yeah, they'll nod their head and they'll smile it off, and they say, "Wow, you're so smart. You're actually onto us. Wow." It's very funny. It's very, very funny. Now, let me tell you about three-dimensional reality again before we get into anything. Then there are other people who will come out and say, "Oh, we live in a matrix. Oh, this world is a matrix." You live in an illusion that nothing exists. Absolute degenerates again. And I've seen so many people who are very highly regarded like spout this absolute bull crap. I'm going to explain to you now why 3D reality is needed in a very simple manner. Okay, in a very simple way. No bullshit. No, crazy complex, sophisticated language or dictionary or words, vernacular, whatever. Very simply, a 2D plane, think of it as a system of zeros and ones and twos, right? A 2D plane, right, is a formulaic system. On a 2D plane, right, everything follows logic and degrees. Now, how our world, our three-dimensional world, is represented within the material realm is, and remember this very clearly, is a an imperfect execution within the material frame of existence of the existing perfect information that is derived from two-dimensional reality. Meaning what? Meaning what? Okay. Before matter is formed, and there's a great book about this, The Holographic World, that you can read. Before material reality is formed, it is saved or stored as form of information. This information is found on a 2D plane, very much like, I don't know, like a program or code, right? Now, this program or code is 0, 1, 2, blah, 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 anywhere from 0 to 9 in our case, okay? And as this program is then manifested within the linearity of time, it is then become manifest in a three-dimensional form. There is such a thing that is called the null portal or the null void, and the circle, the oval circle or the portal, signifies this transitional state. And this transitional state is one where between thought or an idea or an input of information slowly and gradually manifests into material reality. We're not going to touch yet on how this portal works, but what we're going to understand now, again, going back to why this material world is needed. When you have a 2D set of information that is cast into linearity in a three-dimensional space, what happens to this information? It is interpreted by the three-dimensional matrix or the three-dimensional mechanism, right, through which it is made manifest. And then we derive certain senses to then interface with the three-dimensional world. But as we interface with the three-dimensional world, our mind is connected to our three-dimensional bodies, very much like a radio. You're tuned into reality, very much like a radio. So when you're interfacing with, this three-dimensional world, you're still interfacing with a 2D formulaic plane. Meaning, if I touch fire, I will, get burnt, right? And then my three-dimensional body through space-time, it acquires this information, gets it back to my brain. My brain, tells my, you know, higher dimensional mind, this is what happened to us, and then it will, create the formulaic logical basis through which it'll, you know, give us a sensation of burning. So when people say, "Oh, we live in the matrix," this is what they mean. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. No one really goes beyond this, right? There's a massive, massive iceberg beneath this tip, and I'll tell you just what it is. Now, we already talked about 2D and code and script, and 2D and code and script being just basic information. Now, let me tell it to you like this: information can only tell you about a thing, but it cannot show you the thing. Information, for example, can tell you that the moon was beautiful that night, but it cannot show you that the moon was beautiful that night. If a blind person does not understand what a moon is, even though they might understand it through information that you feed them, They can think about the moon, they can conceptualize an object like the moon, but they cannot directly visually interface with the moon. They cannot grasp it. They cannot understand the concept of the thing. And even if you explained in intricate, painful, meticulous detail everything about a scene, well, the trees were like this and the moon was like that, can you envision the object when you only can interface it on a 2D level? Meaning when you can only interface with it on an informational level, right? These are very sophisticated, complex fractal forms. It's very difficult to imagine that. But what is hidden in this knowledge, from thought to utter transformation, meaning the pattern of creation, that anything that resides within our three-dimensional world is created from 0 to 9, 0 being its utmost lower form as just like a thought or a habitual pattern or something and so forth, concept, an idea, philosophy. Then 1 being the baby steps, right? It's almost like that penetrative force that allows it to gleam into the material world. And then 2 and 3 and 4, the more complex steps through which it is created. What comes after 9, which is the final form of the pattern of material creation? 0 again, right? Another portal. That tells you that basis, that basic knowledge, the basic understanding of numerological archetypal philosophy uh, has you understanding where you are and what this world is without even knowing everything else. So let's get back to the 2D frame. Let's get back to information. When information is presented to you in a sensory form, in a three-dimensional form, it becomes more than that information. Okay? So if I gave you a paper or a document, and on this document there said every little itsy bitsy bit of information about, I don't know, a beautiful lamp, what its shape is, how it lights up the room, how it makes you feel, yada yada, whatever. And then if I gave you the actual lamp and I allowed you to see it, what would be the difference in how we interface with these two things? If I allow you to touch it, if I allow you to feel the gentle warmth cast from the light there, what is the difference between those two experiences? Well, the first experience is a given information. It's not an experience. You are experiencing the information being given to you, of course, as a separate, fragmented, aware mind, but you are not experiencing the item that is being talked about. But in the three-dimensional realm, when you are experiencing the item that is being discussed, you intuit knowledge that is beyond its formulaic makeup. Follow me on this, okay? The three-dimensional world is a mirror world that allows you to cast your gaze onto things and experience them on a visual and sensory level. It allows you to experience beauty, the beauty of a thing, the subjective beauty of a thing. Why is it called a mirror world, right? Because not only do you interface with the object or the information now, but you also interface with your own subjective experience of the object. And the subjective experience of that object provides you access to intuition and intuitive insight. And when you have gained access to intuitive insight, suddenly the formulaic information that was given to you about the makeup of this object does not constitute everything about the object. Because you have, how can you receive an information on paper and just by receiving that information on paper, intuit and knowledge that was never on that paper. This is why we say that beauty is a portal to God. And the three-dimensional realm is where beauty can unfold and gradually occur. The three-dimensional realm is the beauty of formulaic design unfolded and blossoming, and we are here and we are allowed to experience it all and intuit knowledge about our intimate knowledge about ourselves through it. This is why linearity in time in the three-dimensional world is required for us to have an understanding of we are not just a piece of formulaic information. We are something more beyond that. We are not just a collection of all the parts that went into building this item that we're referencing, but we are more than the sum of the parts. So the three-dimensional realm needs to be passed if we are to even begin to grasp the depths and the difficulties and the complexities of the realms beyond the three-dimensional plane. First, you must understand beauty, and then you must understand what is beyond the formulaic, what is beyond the rational, what is beyond logical, so on and so forth. If you can begin to think in those terms, you will start to intuit knowledge. It's easier to interface with items. Again, like this. Now, keep this in mind. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. 3D gives beauty to information. 3D allows for subjective understanding and subjective experience with information. And beauty gives further context to the information, to creation. Now, beauty and form serve as a portal to God. And this is what, in the occult circles, when they say, well, it's about seeing through material reality, it's about seeing through things. This is what it really means. Intuition is only accessible through the visual and hearing senses. And in order to intuit something, the execution of the form of the material form must be flawed. This is where DNA and genetics come in. And this is why, let's say, your DNA holds perfect information about who you are and how you're supposed to be and how your face is supposed to be shaped and how the density of your bones should be, so on and so forth. But the material three-dimensional execution of that information is always a little bit off. It's always a little bit asymmetrical. It's always like this and that because three-dimensional space is trapped in a linear stream of time, right? Where you have to be in a constant state of gradual unfolding. And the symptom of this constant state of gradual unfolding is that we can create, let's say, something we can call a mockery of perfect formulaic design, right? But never a full perfected version of that design. And this is also, well, by design, right? If you look at it like that. This is also by design. This has to be a symptom of our world for us to understand the symbolic meanings of the things that we experience here. And largely, this is what constitutes as the primary reason for, let's say, the elite's fascination with art and theatrics and ritual and entertainment. Who are the most prized people in the world today, right? It's the people, it's the celebrities, the actors, the actresses, the musicians. These are worshipped in the Western world, right? Because these are the people who can provide, these are the luminaries, so to speak, who can provide the materials that are needed to intuit knowledge from, well, using the senses of hearing and visuals and so on and so forth. Let's go back to the null portal 09. Let's go back there. Our world, our three-dimensional world, constitutes of three, it's a three-step system. I already talked about this in my numerology post, so I'm not going to go too far into it, but 369, right? So everything that occurs or happens in the physical reality of our realm is bound to this pattern. You, as the human being, as a separate thing, are bound to this pattern. The seasons are bound to this pattern. Archetypal energies are bound to this pattern. Political events are bound to this pattern. So look at each number representing an archetypal energy from 0 to 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each representing an attitude, each representing a form or a degree or level or quality of unfolding that is materialized in the material realm and then calcified in time for a small amount of moments so that we can experience, the linearity of time. We're not actually experiencing the linearity of time, we're just experiencing a very stretched out version of it, right? If you look at it that way. What does the number 0 imply? You go to numerologists, none of them know this, by the way. None of them know this. No one talks about this. All of them just like leave it out all the time, right? Especially the ones who like to make things up. Um, the 0, like we talked about, I call the null portal or the null void, right? Is the space between the acts, is the space between materialization and non-material or immaterial being. And it is also a window, meaning our world, right, through the 0 is open and accessible to beings who do not have material bodies. And so, for example, the act of birthing a new soul or a new child into this world, how does that come about? Right? Well, we have sexual intercourse, and then the body is shaped within the female body, and at some point, magically, the body becomes a radio or a radar that interfaces with a spirit that is found beyond the material realm. So, what is the vehicle that allows one to step into the material world from the immaterial world? Well, you have to build the vehicle in the material world. You have to build the thing, you have to give it shape, form, meaning, name, body, flesh, blood. We'll talk about blood later. Very important. In order for this interfacing to occur. And when the baby, let's say, it's a prenatal form, advances to a certain degree where it can function as an interface or a radio. This is why they call it the spirit. A soul will be injected into it, not aggressively, right? The soul will be injected into the baby. And we call that the miracle of life, right? Where did this consciousness come from? Was it born within the baby? Of course not. Of course not. But rather the three-dimensional execution of the materialization of the stream of genetic information that was the baby before it even was a baby at all, because this vehicle or this body, this statue, this golem, this effigy was raised within the material realm. It prompted, oh yes, prompted the null portal to not only view through the window that we cannot see, by the way, through the mirror world window into our material realm, but it allowed for something to reach out, to fall and to connect with another thing that exists only in the material realm. Congratulations, it's like getting a shiny new car, okay? You got a new vehicle. And what prompts which immaterial awareness or consciousness or sentient being, what prompts who connects with the vehicle, right? Is the genetic code, the DNA storage that is found in our bodies, in our bloodlines, so on and so forth. Yours is unique to yours, meaning that your body is unique to your consciousness. It is representative of your consciousness within this three-dimensional realm. It is perfectly representative of your consciousness in this realm, well, at least on a formulaic level. So it's the best the three-dimensional consciousness can do when it's recreating who you are on a material level. Mm, never thought of it like that, have you now? Yeah. Now, this journey from information to hologram, let's call it a hologram, even though it's not. It's a quantum material matrix, more sophisticated than most conspiracy theorists would like to talk about. Oh, we live in a matrix. No, you don't, you dummy. You cast these material physics-based laws into material reality just by sheer presence, right? Now let's go back and talk about something else, okay? I spoke to you about how you would feel if you were someone who had access to not only this information, but throws just incredible amounts of other types of information about what this world is, what this place is that we inhabit. How would you feel about someone who knew nothing really, and you watch them and you watch them, and they create all these ideas and philosophies and religions, and they play them out, and none of it is truthful, and none of it works, but yet we all pretend we have the perfect answer, and so blah 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 blah. How would you feel? Would you not look at them and say, wow, look at these primitive beings, they know nothing, they know nothing of all the idiocies that they do, right? And let's say if you have the means to do so, and if you have the resources, and if you have the ability and the lack of a moral compass to then go and, treat these people as you would see them as subhumans and basically enslave them, so on and so forth, on a, you know, century scale and basis, right? If you were to go and enslave these people, right? Well, how would you do so? What is the primary thing that is standing between your enslavement and your, authoritative living in this material realm in which you find yourself in the position of an all-knowing or almost all-knowing God in comparison to the rest of these subhuman scum? And all they do is fuck and eat and kill each other. And if you're willing to do it, if you were willing to violate and abuse and exploit, right? What would be the primary threat to your power and influence? Well, it is the eventual and destined awakening of these people, of these amnesiac peoples. Let's go back to blood. When the soul inhabits the body, the blood is where it stays. Or so it is said. And when we talk about the chosen peoples, right? Or some peoples like to call themselves chosen peoples. Many peoples, by the way, not just the apparent ones. And then we have another side that is talking about the mark of the beast and yada yada yada. Let me ask you this. Have you ever has it ever dawned on you to ask the question, what are you chosen for? If someone comes to you and they tell you, well, we're the chosen people, why not ask them, well, what are you chosen for? And they would answer you, but no one asks this question. We have become incapable of asking the questions that really matter. We have become a degenerate species, is what I'm saying, right? And I'll explain to you how and why. There is only one reason why, through popular media, shows, video games, movies, entertainment, theater, fiction, writing, there's only one reason why you're given bits, hints, and snippets of what's really going on, the real makeup of the world. There's only one reason for that, why you're given all of that information when you don't need to have that information. And it is given to you by the same people, right? Who most people say or claim or whatever are violating and defending you, right? And you think it's some sort of cynical trick of the mind, right? Where they like, haha, look at you, you dummy. They're just laughing at you. They don't need that. So you think this is about humiliation? It's not. What this is about is what they were chosen for. And you can ask a lot of people who are into conspiracy and dark magic and so on and so forth in those circles, and even they don't know about this. Even the higher ups, most of them, even they don't know about this stuff because they are degenerated into following what they feel is mystical tradition without understanding the root of it. There is only one battle that takes place in our world, and that one battle is between insanity and sanity. Okay? Like, hear me out very, very carefully now. So, sanity, as considered in universal archetypal thought, is order through order. And insanity is order through chaos. Chaos is another form of order. The non existence of order is also an order. Dark and light are not good and evil, they're not. Both dark and light, the feminine and the masculine forces, are the twin energies that make up the reality of our world. Understand that. Both dark and light serve to educate. That is why one is to the left and the other is to the right. You understand what I'm saying? They're on the same wavelength. So if you're starting from the middle of the cross, you have the light and you have the darkness on either side. But the northern and southern poles of the cross, now those are very interesting and those are very different and they're very rarely talked about, right? The northernmost point of this of the cross represents sanity, awareness, conscious individual thought that returns to the collective as a whole, unified, in unison with the rest of the collective awareness, right? Total absolute awareness of all. And the southernmost point of the cross signifies insanity. This is, let's say, if you are an avid reader of the Lovecraftian mythos, who definitely, or I also believe, was an incredibly powerful channeler, you will understand the primary force of evil isn't evil things or doing evil, or whatever, or dark things. The primary antagonistic force is the utter destruction of the conscious and aware mind, insanity, right? Now we're approaching some truths. Now we're approaching some truths. Now, what is the story of Adam and Eve? It is this story of awakening, of awareness, coming into consciousness, waking into awareness from a state of separation, and waking into separation, but aware, right? So when you awaken, when you become conscious, when you're no longer following the program, right? When you are following the program, you're not separate. You're not fragmented. You're aware. You're emotionally trapped within the same program loop that you're given. But when you actually awaken, when you come to your goddamn senses, that is when you experience separation from your emotional self. So there are two separations. There are two separations that one must go through to advance to the next level, right? Now, let's go back again. I know I backtrack a lot, but this is important. It's important for me to slowly reel you into this because there's a lot of context. The truth is not simple. And genius things are also not simple, as most people would like you to believe, right? Um, what are they chosen for? Right? Chosen peoples. Oh, we are the chosen nation. Blah 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 blah. It's not just the Jews who say this, by the way. It's a lot of peoples around the earth, around the planet who say this, right? And now we have to talk about the flood as well. Now, if I know that this world follows patterns, the pattern from 0 to 9 being 0 is an idea and concept, 1, the first material steps into this world, right? Following all the way up to 9 in a beautiful crescendo of life and the grand theater of it. And I come to number 9, which signifies ending or transformation. 9 is a magical number. It signifies both death and transformation. One has to occur. So when you approach 9, it ha- it has to end, or it has to stop, or it has to transform, right? So when something reaches a boiling point, right? The guest came to your house, you had a great party, the party is over now. That's 3 steps. And then another 3 and another 3, blah blah blah. You approach 9 has to end, or it has to transform. But even this follows the 3-step structure, meaning it has to end on the third one. So the third time you go from 0 to 9, 0 to 9, 0 to 9, it has to end. Meaning your life also follows this pattern. You understand? So in during our lives, right? If it is not destined for us to go early, but even if we are, then it still follows this. You will experience the archetypal energies. These what we call the zodiac and the months and the blah 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 blah. That all these astrologies, the numerologists make a big deal out of it. It's so simple. There are 27 acts to your life, each inhabited by an archetypal energy started from 0 and going to 9, and then either ending there or transforming into your next step, then ending or transforming again into your next step. And the third time it occurs, it has to end. Life has to finish. You understand what I'm telling you? Really think about what I'm telling you. Again, all of these journeymen, they'll come out and, oh, we have this, what do they call it? death code. In astrology, blah blah blah. I can tell the future. No, it's just an understanding, a pre-existing or intuitive understanding of the patterns of the world. If you study these archetypal energies, and this goes back incredibly back in time, right? If you study the archetypal energies, you will understand that there are a total of 13, right? With three being sort of like a hybridized versions of different energies, and the one being the hidden aspect. Ooh, wow, you figured out the world. Boo, boo, boom. Awesome. So from 0 to 9, 0 to 9, 0 to 9 again. And now you know this. Now you know literally the human life follows this pattern. The three nines. And the three nines also make up a 9. They make 27. 2 plus 7 equals 9. 7 is the Reaper scythe. 2 is claiming of the Reaper scythe. The willing claiming of the Reaper scythe. And now you can muse from here. You can find inspiration within you to understand what the 666 means now that you know this. But now take this from your life, the model of your life, take this pattern, this three-step pattern, this three-step system from your life, and then quantify it with everything else in reality. Events, politics, geopolitics, history, geophysical events, great floods, great destructive whatever's that happen on the earth. How civilizations are built, made, formed, destroyed, blah, 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 blah. What is the difference between this 9x structure in everything you experience, the intervals between? Now, in order, if I were someone with pre-existing knowledge, again, I'm just going to say, if I were a dark mage with pre-existing knowledge of all of these things and hundreds of other things that you don't know about, hundreds and hundreds of other things that people will bullshit you about that they think is real, or this is my theory, bullshit. Proven very simply through symbolism and observation. If you can observe the world, you will observe this pattern. Observe the seasons, you will observe this pattern. You observe the formation and the quantity of the planets in each solar system, you will observe this pattern. Now, if I had pre-existing information of things like this, right, I would invert all of these. I would invert the three nines into the three sixes. And even the three sixes would make a 9 because they make up for 18. 1 plus 8 equals 9. So what I would do, 9 can be death or transformation. The final one is no longer a choice. It is a result of the other patterns as they unfolded. When you have a peoples that say, we are a chosen people, I want you to understand what they are chosen for. And I want you to understand what they feel they're chosen for. If I have an awakening spiritual, let's say Christian community, okay? I have a Christian community and they wish to awaken. They wish to know more about the world, of themselves. They wish to transcend this physical reality from 2D, like we talked about, into 3D so they can understand the meaning of beauty and interface with God indirectly through the understanding of beauty. If they can interface with God, they create architecture and beautiful monuments and they meditate on them to interface with a higher divine power or higher divine being. They want to move from the 3D to the 4D, but I want to keep them stuck in the 4D, in the 3D, because I'm stuck in the 3D. Why am I stuck in the 3D? Well, I have done things that have disallowed me to interface with the higher realms. So Once this pattern is over, once this era is over, right? There will be a decision that'll have to be made, right? Does the experiment start from scratch, or do we transcend to the next valley of existence? This is why all of our planets, all of the places that are around us in the cosmos and the stars, which we were not supposed to see, by the way, with how we were formed in this material world, but we still did thanks to technology. Why they're so empty is because civilizations, great civilizations, spiritual, not technocratic, but spiritual civilizations, they do not conquer other planets. They conquer this dimension. They ascend and transcend into the next dimension. Therefore, they are no longer required to carry three-dimensional bodies. You understand what I'm saying? Because we're in a transitional state from just being information and then being something more than that information. But now if I wanted to lock these souls in who are coming into awareness, into consciousness, into a three-dimensional realm through a four-dimensional prison, well, what would I do? I would do I would inflict great sins upon them, right? I would inflict great sins upon them. I want you to study World War II for this. I would do despicable things to these people. I would set myself up as the effigy or the sacrificial lamb, the true blood sacrifice. I'm going to give you another example. There's a great recounting from Roman military history where the Romans first set foot on the British Isles, where most of the tribesmen, pagans, heavy pagan tribesmen, and women who lived there, they greeted them with no weapons on the shorelines of Britain. And when the Romans arrived in their full military clothing and their gear and their wonderful formations, and an incredibly the immensity of their military presence, and they stepped on that shore and they charged the enemy because the enemy was standing in front of a great forest on a valley. They were standing like they were in battle formation. So when the Romans charged them, they cut them down to the very last man. They cut them all down. And as these people were dying, only then the Romans realized, wait a second, why didn't they fight back? And then a group of women comes out, butt naked, bare assed, okay? They come out of the forest with torches in their hands and they burn, themselves included, and everything else, and everyone else, and the corpses of everyone else who were, they light it all on fire. The Romans are terrified. Like, what the hell are these people doing? These people are crazy. And they step back and they watch them all burn in this ginormous, ritualistic, pagan display of whatever the hell it is for them. Now, if you ask any historian, and most historians today have no self respect whatsoever, they will tell you, oh, because they knew these pagan tribes from the British Isles, they knew that the Romans were very, um, what's the word called? I forgot the word. But yeah, they were superstitious. Yeah, there you go. And that's why they did it. To scare them off the isle. Of course, it didn't scare them off the isle. But from a pagan understanding, from a black magic understanding, right? The Romans were both the willing but unaware participants of this grand ritual. They spilled the blood that fed the fires, and the spell was cast by their own hand. Now, back to the chosen people thing. Okay, remember what I just told you. Back to the chosen people thing. I want you to understand a very important thing about dark magic, real dark magic, not some of this bullshit, this whatever occultists try to sell you. Real dark magic is that it is always a magic of self sacrifice. And if I wanted to turn your three nines into three sixes, if I wanted to keep you in a low state, if I wanted to keep you in a state of nothing, no potential, and you're a Christian man or woman, and you turn the other cheek, and you talk about tolerance and love and forgiveness, how far does your forgiveness go? If I tell you, I did these terrible things to your people, I poisoned your wells, I poisoned your waters. I poisoned your skies every day. I killed your children. I did this and that to your wife while you weren't looking. How far can your forgiveness go? You think you're better than all of us? You think you're so high and mighty? Let's see if you don't take the 666, which is the mark of the beast, as they have taken. Let's see if you don't take inversionism, right? Let's see if you don't take it. And why I'm showing you this thing, again, I talked about this in the past as well. If you make a voodoo doll, right? If you make a voodoo doll and pierce needles into it, does that voodoo doll have power? No, it doesn't. When does it begin to have power? When other people see you doing it. And when the person you're doing it to believes it has power. So you go and you make a little voodoo doll and you sort of hide it in your little lock box and you put it in your room. And one day, the person you did it against, they will waltz into your room for whatever reason and accidentally find it, or you will put it under their pillow and they will accidentally find the juju, right? And they're like, oh my God, someone put a voodoo doll under my pillow. I must be cursed. When does the spell begin to work? When the target of the spell, and the spell was nothing, by the way, before this, when the target of the spell becomes a willing but unaware participant of the magical ritual taking place. This is how you are you play the fool or the jester or the clown. This is what the symbol of the jester represents in any kind of mythos or religious manuscript. And once you take part in that, right? So let's say today there's a people who come out and they say, well, we are the chosen people and we're waiting for our Messiah to come. And we are showing you all of these signs that we worship the antichrist, the devil, let's say, which is again a form of inversionism or inverted alignment with the enlightened and the awakened mind, right? I'm showing you all of these terrible material things that I'm doing in this world. The moment, the moment you take up arms against me, the moment I infect you with and corrupt you with hatred is the moment I defeat you. So when we say chosen people, we being chosen for sacrifice. That's what we really mean. If you ever wanted to summon a dark messiah into a realm such as ours, how would you go about doing it? You would have to do it through the greatest ritual sacrifice that was ever known to man, witnessed by all. Look at World War II, for example. Not World War One, that was more complex. Look at World War II. The deliberate regression and destruction of the human race sparked a rebellion so cruel and vile that it became eventually worse than the evil that spawned it, thus increasing the evil. And puppet nations and puppet countries and puppet cultures will create it as sacrificial offerings, just as, let's say, today, as one example of many, Israel was formed. Mm. Israel itself is an inversion of the true country of Israel, which existed way before. A lot of people don't know this. And that Israel carried all of the knowledge and the wisdom of the pre flood era that we talked about, right? So you're not being shown these things out of some humorous, cynical display. You are being tempted, my dearest friends. We all are. We are being tempted to take up arms and corrupt our own souls in the pursuit of what we perceive as cosmic justice or human justice or whatever. A single generation might be sacrificed to keep the timeline, the current timeline, ticking in the way it is right now, right? And those people don't mind it. Believe me, they don't. And the null void, the null realm, right? That can open up just a tiny bit more, right? And when we're in these states of hatred and anger and destruction and filth and corruption, a little bit more can seep out of that null void, right? The Saturnian prisons of time, the hexagonal, or not actually hexagonal, but the tesseract and cube-shaped multi-dimensional prison realm through which darker entities than ourselves might peer into our realm. They need vessels. They cannot be born into this world. They need vessels. How do you give them vessels, right? By corrupting the ones that exist already. Evil cannot create, it can only corrupt, right? Without even evil in the traditional sense, not in the sense of darkness and light, both of these forces serve the ultimate good. But evil in the form of insanity. Again, the evil things that are being done in our world, that are being showcased so blatantly to us, right? That is the temptation. And the moment you rise up against it, the moment you take up arms, the moment you experience hatred towards it, the moment you want to kill it, destroy it, burn it, whatever you want to do, imprison it, is the moment you take up the mark of the beast. And this is a cyclical prophecy. This is a cyclical prophecy going from 0 to 9 in patterns since the dawn of time. And only few souls. Why does the judgment come after the eschatonic time? Why does the judgment come after the zodiacal light, the final gleaming? Why does God's justice happen after the end of the world? And why does it say if you want to talk biblically, that even the brightest will be fooled into taking up the mark of the beast, which is the inversion of divine and godly design of our world. Our world was designed for beauty. Our world was designed to be a portal to higher realms through the study and meditation of beauty. Yet here you are experiencing it as a lesser thing. And that is why we're not advancing to the next level. Humanity is not advancing to the next level. How you see geopolitically right now, things that are unfolding. How people are left to die, they're being bombed and destroyed, and yada yada. Both sides, right? Hatred, anger, filth, instead of building beauty. If that is not the mark, then I don't know what is, my dearest friends. It doesn't have to be a chip in your brain. It doesn't have to be a physical thing at all. It has to be a mind space, a very hellish, twisted, cold mind space that disallows you spiritual growth. So the black magician, the master ritualist, they will always tempt you to take part in the trick. They will always tempt you. Like I always say, if you want to understand the basis of ritual, real ritual, and how it works, watch The Wicker Man from 1971 or 3, I forgot. Amazing, great movie with so much context, with so much hidden info, with so much symbolism. Watch it, learn it, understand who you're dealing with. Again, don't forget that your purpose in this life, and we're going to talk about the whys and hows and whatever later. We're just talking about what the general agenda, the dark agenda here is. Your purpose is to transcend this realm, not to cast judgment and wrath onto other people, no matter how deserving. That is the teaching of Jesus, Yeshua, whatever you want to call him. That is the fundamental teaching of Christianity and any other line of religious thought or religious philosophy that you will ever encounter that does not have an evil root. Don't forget why you're here. You are here to transcend this realm. You are not here to repeat your mistakes and the mistakes of others. And that is the inversionist death cult eschatonic agenda, right? That's why those people are chosen. They are chosen to act as the sacrificial deadwood for the pyres of the greatest ritual of the conjuring of darker forces, of keeping our reality or timeline at a low and manageable state. That's what they're chosen for. And again, I'll say it again, if you've ever wanted, if you've ever mused or envisioned technically within the physical realm how one would, what it would take to summon the sort of dark messiah, right, from its Saturnian prison realm, I imagine it would be something along the lines of such a ritual, right? And another form would be, of course, the creation of the artificial body through it, in which the soul is housed. But I don't think they can, and I don't think they will through AI, because that also follows a pattern, right? Now, before we finish today, understand that there are many things you do not know. There are many things I could tell you, someone else might tell you. But the most important thing you should learn and, well, ponder is your own intuition. and your understanding of the imagery of life. That's the most important thing. A thing can be more than a thing, depending on who views it. Water is just water until you bless it. Paint is just paint on the wall until it becomes a silhouette. Until you start seeing more in it and through it than what it is or what it was designed to be. This is the other end of magic. This is etheric magic. This is the sorcery of light. And the greatest and the oldest and the most ancestrally explored choice in this world is there's one path that leads to fullness, insanity, and awareness of that fullness, acceptance of that fullness. And there is another that leads to uniformity, also another form of wholeness, right? But I would argue, a far less pleasurable one. How can you become everything and nothing at the same time? It is either through the acceptance of all or through the disillusion of your conscious sentient mind through the sickness of insanity. Those are the two primary forces that we're dealing with here. And what's the greatest shortcut for you to fall from your current state of tolerance and love and beauty into insanity? It is if someone very smart and very resourceful convinces you to do so by taking up arms against them. If Jesus had a magical blade with which he could slay the devil, would he and should he? Really think on that. Really, really, really think on that. That's the lesson of this life. That is the symbolic gesture of reality itself. Everything else, all of these formulaic rules and laws and yada yada, yes, they're important as well. Yes, they're great. Yes, they're quote unquote cheat codes for life. Physiognomy, numerology, astrology. Yes. Okay. You get it. You're really cool, you know? You know all of these formulaic whatever theories and you can tell shit, just by looking at it. Whatever. Are you ascending or are you descending? Are you progressing or are you regressing? The real question. Enough of these ego games, right? Enough of these ego games. Where are you headed? And what are you willing to not do to get to where you want to go? The moment you pick up a weapon, the moment you go to war, the moment you spill blood is the moment you're becoming a willing and unaware participant of the ritual of calcification, the calcification of the mind, body, spirit, soul, and you're regressing into a lesser existence that is disallowing our realm and our collective human race to transcend to lands and realities beyond it. And before we get to what is beyond it, We will get to arguably what is the most pleasurable portion of it is the transitional period between our current dark, dust, dusty, like murky, muddy, mucky, terrible reality from this to cleanliness and purity and goodness and wholesomeness and good food and great neighbors and beautiful valley. You understand where I'm going? You understand where I'm going? You live in a world, you were brought into a world where there were two possibilities. And one possibility was that you could make a heaven out of this world that you were brought into. You were brought into a world where it is possible to reach near heaven, near perfection. And the other possibility was that you could make a complete and dark hell out of it. And look at our human race over the span of millennia, over the span of several floods and destructive events. Why? Because they chose to make a hell out of it each and every damn time. Where only small souls, little specks, little gleaming specks of fire, only small, tiny souls made their way out, like Thoth the Atlantean. And they woke up in a dark room and saw that everyone else was sleeping. Everyone else was asleep. Only these individual key souls could make it out of this great theater, this great experiment of life. And when they saw what they saw, right? When Neo wakes up from the Matrix, from his little pod, and sees the grand room, everyone is asleep, being harvested in this terrible, terrible prison realm of illusory reality. The very first feeling and emotion that overwhelms him is one of acute loneliness. And the second emotion that overwhelms him is his desire to go back and help awaken these people. Because he understands that in order to transcend, he is O and E, right? He's the one. Without a state of collective oneness, we cannot ascend this realm. We cannot transcend. We cannot start making that heaven out of it. And while there is time, the clock is ticking. We started from a zero. We are at a certain phase now. With the few phases left. The clock is ticking. Really think on that. Really think on what kind of world you want to create. Inhabit the mindset and the spirit and the mental attitude of the person who already lives in the heavenly realm with which you want to see created in this realm. Because I tell you right now, my friends, you are not in the majority. You are not in the majority. You are the only true minority that exists in this world. The few with the level and degree of awareness to not only understand who they are, but to also see darkness and evil for what it is, and then to have the mental strength and the strength of character to resist wanting to take up arms against it, to punish it, to dispense God's wrath. What do you do by doing so? You only increase the suffering of this world, just like in World War II, right? Just like in any other case. All right, that's enough for today. Thanks everyone for viewing, hearing. Um, I hope you'll take it easy. There's a lot of detail to each and every one of these topics um, that we cannot get into, and I will not get into. It doesn't matter. Just the broader general reality matters. Do the rest of the research on your own. You can do it. Um, buy my books if you want to support me. Buy a face reading session or something. I appreciate that. It's not necessary, but still. Think about these things that we talked about. Think about what role you're playing into, you know, what kind of world you want to make. And think about who's tempting you and how you're currently, even now, being tempted to, you know, do things that you otherwise would never do in the cleanliness and the purity of your spirit that we all know we have. Who's tempting you to hate them? Who's tempting you to punish them? All right, I'll see you guys on the next one.